I'm supposed to tell you and remind you that there's 12 minutes that she's going to speak, and there's 6 minutes for judging questions. During that time, there's no other questions except for the questions from the judges. This is, Mashri Padiyat. Excellent. Sorry. And I will be reading them.
Good afternoon. As she said, my name is Manashri. I'm in 6th grade and I attend Math and Science Academy in Blueberry. Bread dodo, saving bread from extinction. Now, you're probably wondering what a dodo bird has to do with bread. Let's find out. I'm sure you know bread is one of the most common foods eaten around the world. You and I eat over 50 pounds of bread per year. But did you know, in recent years, the sales of bread have been dropping primarily due to the anti-carb movement. Bread is also being replaced by more sugar-laden snacks like toaster strudels and breakfast bars. Glad to know consumers are looking for bread with better nutritional profile, leading to the increase in whole wheat bread sales. So now we need to know, can bread be saved? So what else is going on in the world of bread? Well, in Canada, a vegetable fortified bread has been introduced. There's also research going on to see if you can replace bread flour with vegetable-based flour in Europe, but there have been cost and manufacturing issues. The addition of a spice, turmeric, in bread has also been studied in Asia, and it shows that the antioxidant activity goes up. Spices have been used for thousands of years by many cultures to enhance the flavor and aroma of food, like Indian food, and also for preservation and medicinal value. Antioxidants are substances that prevent or delay cell damage by stopping the oxidation process, which can create free radicals that destroy cells. So antioxidants are good for you. So the key question is, can the nutritional profile of whole wheat bread be enhanced further? Will including small amounts of antioxidant-rich ingredients have a large impact on the whole wheat bread's physical and sensory properties? Well, my hypothesis is that the bread made with the antioxidants will still taste acceptable. Whole wheat bread already has a rougher texture, darker color, and more intense flavor, so the additional ingredients will be less noticeable. Here's a research plan I followed. First, conduct a baseline study to understand the impact and the interaction of the 3 key ingredients in bread: water, sugar, and yeast. Then for each bread made, measure the height and assess the appearance, taste, and texture. The approach I used was design of experiments, DOE, a method which allows you to study the impact of many variables simultaneously. For example, since I studied 3 variables at 3 different levels, I would have to make 27 breads. But with the DOE, I only had to make 10, and I still understood the impact and the interaction. So here's a table showing the basic recipe: 50% whole wheat flour and 50% white flour, the constants, the variables, and the level to which they were varied. Based on the DOE, choose a control recipe, then add the antioxidant-rich ingredients in a reasonable amount. Then for each bread, again, measure the height and assess the appearance, taste, and texture. So now for some results. This is a cube plot representing the design. Low water, high water, low sugar, high sugar, low yeast, and high yeast. Each picture represents the bread made for that design point, and the height is in the corner in centimeters. As you can see, the high yeast, low water breads were poofy. The low yeast, low water breads had smooth, rounded tops. And all the high water breads, regardless of sugar and yeast, were smaller and had flattened tops. Other observations were, on the high sugar breads, there were dark brown patches due to caramelization, and the tallest bread was when there was high sugar, high yeast, and low water, and when there was high water, the bread was pulled down. Also for the high water breads, there was unmixed flour on the edges. So based on the DOE and the interaction plots which are in the paper, I picked a control. But before adding the antioxidant-rich ingredients, I decided to do another experiment. I was having too much fun. I wanted to see what would happen if excess water and sugar were brought in by the antioxidant-rich ingredients. So I made 3 additional breads, one with double the yeast, one with double the sugar, and one with double the water. This was an extreme experiment. For the 2X yeast bread, it had an extremely uneven top and had a slight aftertaste. The 2X sugar had darker, really dark brown patches due to caramelization, and it was extremely sweet. And the 2X water bread, well, it was an extremely crumbly mess. Like I said, it was an extreme experiment. So based on this experiment, I picked largely dry and not too sweet antioxidant-rich ingredients. So I added turmeric, the bread was yellower, tomato paste, tinge of orange, dark chocolate, browner, garlic, slightly shorter and a bit mushier, pomegranate juice, tinge of purple, cayenne, no change in color, and garbanzo puree was slightly shorter and a bit mushier. And that's primarily due to the water the beans brought in, and it shows from the DOE that that happens when there's high water. But I was slightly confused on why the garlic was slightly shorter and a bit mushier, so I researched it and I found out that garlic can have a negative impact on yeast, so other interactions with ingredients do need to be considered. However, all the breads were considered acceptable from a taste standpoint. Cayenne had the most noticeable spicy aftertaste, and the dark chocolate bread was sweeter, personally my favorite. So this study shows that antioxidant-rich ingredients can be added to whole wheat bread to enhance the nutritional profile without impacting the physical and sensory properties significantly. However, quantitative measurements are needed. All of my measurements, other than height, were qualitative because I did not have access to tools and techniques that allow you to study the antioxidant activity, color, bread strength, etc. Also, the breads were only taste tested by one person, me. It needs to be taste tested with multiple consumers, kids and adults, because they have different preferences, and also for non-whole wheat consumers and 100% whole wheat consumers. The bread also has to be evaluated in different formats. For example, with spreads and sandwiches, toasted, etc. I only ate the bread fresh. Also, there were several additional factors that need work on. There could be DOEs around the antioxidant-rich ingredients, and repeatability in an experiment is always good. I repeat the control every week. However, the design can also be repeated. And it also needs to work in an industrial oven. My bread was made in a bread maker. And cost is a big factor and needs to be considered, because it's bread after all. So through this whole process, I learned about bread and how to appreciate the science in food. I also learned about spices and how they're good for you. Now I even know about DOEs, formulating a problem, researching it, thinking critically, and writing like a scientist. So I'd like to thank my mom for being my advisor and guiding me through the whole process, my dad for helping me plan the experiments and analyze the data in Minitab, and my brother for eating my experiments without complaining. Thanks also to my school MSA for encouraging the love of science, and to the science fair community for this opportunity. Science fairs, what can I say? Best thing since sliced bread. Thank you.
All right, there's 6 minutes for questioning.
Nice job. So if you were to repeat this over, and we're going to start from scratch, what would you do differently?
Well, I think that I could really just do it over again to make sure to get out, all the mistakes and yeah.
What were some of the mistakes?
Well, in the DOE, there, is some things that like go wrong. Well, okay, so the tallest spread, like I said, was when there was high yeast, high sugar, and low water. And I tried that again to see if it was high, and it was not as high as that, so I think some mistakes do happen, so you could try that again.
How many times did you do these trials? Did you do each bread only once, or did you do them multiple times?
I mostly did each bread once. I think I repeated the tallest bread once.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. In one of your slides, you had asterisk that said water adjusted.
Yeah. So
Would you explain me what that means?
yeah. So for the pomegranate juice, since on from this experiment, I learned that if that it doubled the water, that happens. So I wanted to adjust the water to still make it, more so I like it, because I didn't really like the high water breads.
Thank you.
Question? So you have a list of a lot of parameters here, but if you think about it, are there any missing parameters that you didn't include that may affect your experiment?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I couldn't.
So if you go back to your chart of parameters, like amount of yeast, the water among ingredients, okay, you list
This
all,
one?
yeah, like that. So you list a lot of ingredients, but if you think about further, are there any parameters that might affect your experiment, but you didn't list there?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well,
Are there any other factors that you would add in maybe in a later experiment?
Well, salt, I didn't really want to vary the salt because I did not want inedible bread, because I had to eat all of these, and if salt was varied, it would be like not edible.
for example, would you think time? Would time be an ingredient? For example, how long you give the yeast to work, how long you bake it?
Well, I had a bread machine, and it was it mixed the ingredients for 5 minutes, then it added the yeast, and it was a rapid bake cycle. It was 1 hour and 55 minutes. So it was the same thing every time.
So that's your instrument.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I eat bread every week, and it's kind of like my breakfast every day. So I actually asked my dad, what do the different ingredients in bread do? So we kind of started off with that, and it just got further and further, and we eventually did this.
In your across the different breads that you made, did you try to make sure to use yeast from maybe the same jar or?
Oh yeah, it was a huge packet of yeast, and it was vacuum dried, and we opened it up and started the experiment with the new packet of yeast.
Did you come across any problems in particular that really stood out to you while you were doing this experiment? Were you having any issues with your bread machine, for instance? And if you had any problems, how did you work through them, I guess?
Well, my dad was gone on a trip, and I kind of like had a blank moment, and I forgot how to get to the cycle. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I already had all the ingredients out. And so I actually had to call my mom and have her help me.
Okay, that's okay.
How did you select the ingredients to add to the bread?
Well, I actually went on a website, and it had like a list of antioxidant-rich ingredients, and from this experiment, I knew that I couldn't pick, wet and very sweet ingredients. So I based it off of that and some, like what we had at home. Like I have cayenne, turmeric, and a bunch of spices, tomato paste. I have all that stuff at home. We use that in daily cooking.
So you didn't want to add too much water, but you did figure out a way around it with pomegranate juice,
Yeah.
where you just substituted out water. Were there other ingredients that you thought about doing that same kind of thing to maintain your water levels, but to add more antioxidants?
Well, I think pomegranate juice and garbanzo puree were the two wettest ingredients. But for garbanzo puree, I decided not to because I don't know. It's just pomegranate juice was very wet and it's liquid, but garbanzo puree is more or less solid.
All right, thank you. There's actually no more time for